Hey everyone, my name is Jake. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and the thing with Jehovah's Witnesses is that it is a literal patriarchy. Only men are allowed to have privileges, as we called them. They're the only ones who are allowed to be elders, to have a position of prominence in the congregation. Men take the lead. There are no women elders, there are no women circuit overseers, let alone governing body members. And women are supposed to be in subjection to their husbands. And so that's something that I have had to unpack a lot since leaving the group. And it's something that on a global scale, I think a lot of men are unpacking, or maybe not yet, but they should, because patriarchy is bad for men too. And so I wanted to talk about this with another ex-JW dude, fella, who I just see as a great dude, great guy, good vibes, says things I like. And so here to help me tackle this subject is my good buddy RC.
Hey,
What's going on, my dude?
that I'm glowing over that intro.
Oh, good. We should make each other glow. Let's say that first. I think guys need to compliment each other more.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I want to shout this out before this poster deletes his comment in
Oh,
embarrassment, but don't do that.
the JWs are not a cult guy.
We have a special guest in the audience who I didn't know was going to be here, but someone named Joseph Miller, who says, "Wha?" Or maybe, no, I'm sorry, it's "Wham! Stop crying and move on with your lives. JW are not a cult. They're a worldwide religion. Only the ignorant call them a cult." Now that's interesting.
I mean, they're a worldwide real estate corporation that used to be a publishing company.
Yeah. There are also, worldwide criminal enterprises. Like you could say, hey, hang on a second. You know, ExxonMobil is not evil. We're a business. We've got so many locations. That's a terrible example because I didn't have one prepared. But I hope, and I don't even know if that's a real thing that I just said. I don't even know if they exist anymore. But I hope that this person stays tuned. And what they've engaged in is an interesting verbal tactic that Jehovah's Witnesses use, where they say, we're not a cult because we're a Christian religion. And it's like, we're big, so we can't be a cult.
Well, Joseph, I just want to say that the governing body has said time and time again how dangerous it is to go online and entertain the thoughts of apostates or have conversations with them. So congratulations on taking your first step toward realizing that you disagree with the governing body on something.
Yeah, no, for real. I think like if somebody is willing to comment, they are at least willing to disobey that very direct counsel, as they would put it, that you're not supposed to engage with
I
the kind
would,
of things that ex-members are saying.
it's like you're a little baby. You're like a apostate fetus at this point.
That's right. And we won't get into things like abortion necessarily in the nature when life begins, because I don't really know or care that much. Yeah, the mafia is not a gang. It's a worldwide money laundering scheme. That's very different. MLMs are multi-level marketing schemes, and pyramid schemes are totally different, and that means there's nothing unethical about them. And so now one thing, you had some things that you were going to jump into. One thing that I wanted to say, just as a little preamble, is that I am using the word like cults and patriarchy and stuff in the description of the video, because I have to use words to say something. But I'm okay. If you want to say Jehovah's Witnesses are not a cult, that's fine. What I'm interested in is determining whether they're harmful. And if you don't like, if the word patriarchy upsets you or something, okay, well, let's call it something else. But I think I want to be able to try and articulate things in a way that might appeal to somebody who, in my perception, has fallen down a different cult. Maybe it's a group like Jehovah's Witnesses, or maybe it's more of a political movement or something secular, weird fitness guru type person. But these kind of structures exist all over the place. And as you can see from Joseph Miller, people who are in a cult do not know it. And that's the scary thing, is that you could be wrong. and I might be wrong about a lot of stuff I say, so hopefully RC will push back on me. You had something you wanted to say about empathy.
Yeah, well, so
Were you going to say that it's a human weakness? Like Elon Musk?
it's the exploit of the Western world.
Terrible. Empathy is really, actually, really bad, actually. I think we should say that as a society. That's my Elon Musk. I don't know.
Now I want to try to do RFK Jr., but I'll botch it.
I got one of those too, but I'm going to let you talk.
Yeah, so for me, there's an author by the name of Bell Hooks, a feminist author, and it's interesting because Red Pill is sort of like feminism has destroyed the relationships between men and women. There's a feminist author by the name of Bell Hooks that talks about like from a feminist perspective, like how do we navigate this? Like, she wants to be in a relationship with a man. She loves men. There's a whole different kind of vibe in that book. And one of the things she talks about is just sort of like, we do have to figure out a way to acknowledge like masculine pain and male struggles. So we can't just immediately say, okay, well, the patriarchy did it. Men are part of the patriarchy. So like everything that you're experiencing is your fault. And like, too bad, so sad, sucks to be you. And so, I think that a conversation about like, how do people get roped into Red Pill needs to go from the perspective of like, what are the experiences and feelings that sort of lead a person to want to try to make sense of the world in that way? And what need is it filling and what problem is it solving for them? And at the same time, like before doing that, we need to acknowledge like Red Pill ideology is harmful to women. Right. And so like me having empathy for how people can begin to think that this stuff is the way or make sense and trying to sort of like identify from a perspective of empathy. I want to be clear that I'm not coming at this from a place of blame or trying to remove responsibility for harmful behavior or place the responsibility for men's harmful behavior onto somewhere else or make excuses. And we also just have to acknowledge when we have conversations like this and we're talking about harm and pain and frustration and stuff that, it is still the case that it's more dangerous to be a woman, and we've been through stuff various levels of, I would say that I've experienced some pretty harmful stuff in relationships, but like, I've never been afraid for my life.
Right.
And so like, that's the kind of thing that I want to put in perspective of, I feel needs to acknowledgement before we start talking about how men struggle in the world. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I wasn't expecting you to mention Bell Hooks right off the bat. It's a great recommendation. The Will to Change is a great read for anybody interested in this subject. I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. I agree with what you said about kind of trying to find common ground with the kind of concerns that lead people to Red Pill ideology. It was really the moment where I was like, oh my God, I don't think I can ignore these doubts anymore about our religion, Jehovah's Witnesses. Was I was watching a video by H Bomber Guy, one of the great dudes on the internet, and it was his video about flat earthers, which is mostly very funny. But at the end, he's very sincerely saying, people who are flat earthers, their concerns about the government is not necessarily trustworthy, and we can't have complete faith in these institutions, and there are things going wrong in the world, and a lot of the concerns that they have are real, but they're directing them in a crazy way.
There's a deeper emotional truth that underlies the sentiment and the sort of like draw toward those things. And then folks need their emotional truth validated by making actual claims of truth.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't work. That's where it starts to break down, which like the idea of like, come on, do you trust the government? Look at MK Ultra and all Bay of Pigs. And like, do you trust the government? They do stuff like, I agree. I agree. I just, there's like a sort of level of the amount of people involved in a conspiracy gets past about like 6 or 7. And I'm like, like I've worked with people, big groups of people, they can't coordinate and keep secrets. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
like
Life experience is the like actually interacting with people who are in those kinds of positions is the best way to realize like, oh, this is all there's actually these are just people who go to work and their work is at the Department of Agriculture or whatever. But that's getting a little off track. I want to talk about your experience.
I was going to say, like, on that note, just of you're relating the cult to you're relating Jehovah's Witnesses to like flat earth theology and this sort of conspiratorial thinking. There's a conversation to be had about the similarities of like, what do you get from a religion, and then what do you get from joining Red Pill? And so like, I feel like that's one conversation, and another conversation is sort of like the relational trauma piece and the sort of like frustration with dating life. But, like when, as a JW, you leave the religion, you get shunned, you lose your family, you lose your community, you lose camaraderie, you lose social support. And, we'll get into, I'll kind of talk about it later, because I went down the Red Pill rabbit hole for about, a month, and was just like, okay, wait a minute. This sounds like a lot like doing to women what the governing body did to me. Is kind of like, as soon as I started wrapping my mind around it, when you get into stuff about sort of like how to control and alter somebody else's perception of reality and keep them in your frame and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to become the thing that I hate. You know what I mean? But I think there's a problem that I think can happen, which is there's a sort of like very rational lens where you're in the religion, you're miserable, it sucks. And then you go discover like evolution, and you learn that the flood wasn't real. And you learn about like when the Bible canon was formed, and there was like a bunch of different forms of first century Christianity. And so like now you have the facts and the rationality and the logic, and you're like, okay, fuck the cult, I'm out of it. And then you don't realize that there's another component to the religion, which is these like systems of control and hooks into the way that your mind can react under like scarcity or fear or a sense of threat or loss. And that those hooks, if you don't really start to learn how it is that a person gets emotionally manipulated into being a part of a religion like this, it's very easy to wind up outside of the religion, and then you've lost a handful of things. Like you've lost your sense of belonging and community and support and solidarity. And then you've also lost like the rules for life, right? You've lost what I would call boundaries. Like with JWs, boundaries are very much like, these are the rules and the elders will enforce it. But it does kind of give you something where it's like when everything's on the table and anything's possible, that kind of freedom can be very destabilizing for somebody. And it's the first time in your life that you've experienced just sort of like, there's no rules. What do I do? How do I figure this out? Right. And so
exactly.
Red Pill gives you sort of like boundaries in the sense of like, these are the rules. This is the framework. Like you don't do this, you do that, and you act this way, don't act that way. And it also teaches you to stick up for yourself. So if you're if you happen to be a male who's higher on like agreeableness, like really kind of just like a bit of a pushover, and maybe temperamentally, maybe you had some like stuff in your childhood, you were a little bit like parentified, or had a interesting relationship with your mother that wasn't so great, and you kind of have this sort of like, I'm afraid of women, I can't stand up for myself, I get hurt in relationships over and over again. And I think for some guys, Red Pill is the first time that somebody says to them, you can say no. Like you can say no. You can say, I'm the alpha, right?
It has,
which is like,
it has like a veneer of empowerment.
Yeah. And the real thing you want is boundaries. But instead of
Yeah.
giving boundaries, they tell you like be alpha, which is kind of
Right.
like basically giving you permission to say no for the first time. And this is what I want. This is how I feel. This is what matters to me. And I think for a certain kind of person who has maybe always felt like I don't fit the male stereotype. I'm not aggressive. I don't get what I want. Other guys get what they want. And all of a sudden this thing says, oh no, you can ask for it. You can demand it. You can say no, you can assert your needs. The problem is it's like, you have like passivity and then you have aggression. And in between that is assertiveness. And red pill takes you from passive to aggressive and completely misses assertive. And that's a theme that we'll get into more is this like is very black and white. It's like there's this extreme, there's that extreme. And the truth is kind of in the middle. Like you don't want to
along those lines, they bypass like I don't have any self-confidence to arrogance when in the middle is just self-confidence, like self-loathing to arrogance, where the healthy thing is just self-confidence.
Well, and that's but not trying to be like a complete psychology nut, but a lot of a superiority complex is a great mask for an inferiority complex. Like really, I truly believe that most of the people that are walking around with a superiority complex are putting on a mask because they are deeply afraid of you actually discovering how they feel about themselves underneath. And maybe they have done it so long and gotten so good at it that they have suppressed within themselves this deep-seated sense of like, I'm not okay, I'm not enough. And so, you better not see through the cracks and the facade of that sort of mask of superiority, because what you're uncovering underneath it is something that this person is deeply ashamed of. But it feels good at first.
Yeah. I think the inverse of that would be the incel movement, which is kind of doing the other kind of self-validation that's like, yes, you are disgusting, you are too ugly, and your bone structure isn't right to attract women. And so, yeah, you do suck. And but that means you do have this your anger is righteous and good. Let me set the table on a couple things here before we get too far into this, because I'm realizing a couple things. I'm realizing that we've been just kind of talking about men broadly. We didn't say like straight men, or I guess you could throw in bisexual guys, but I think the kind of toxicity we're talking about is the kind of like men dominating women sort of thing. And so there are all kinds of cults anyone can fall into. This just happens to be the subject this evening. The other thing I want to do is get a little bit of an introduction to did you feel like you had a strong perception or a strong take on like yourself as a man and like what women were like? Was that present? Like, was that at the forefront of your mind?
This is kind of the part where I'm like gonna put myself out there on the internet at like the warts and all.
All right, let's see those warts, buddy.
Okay, so I had an extremely emotionally unstable mother. And for me, it was to the point I was the oldest of the kids and I was kind of a parentified child. Like I learned to emotionally tune to what was going on with my mom and just tune my own shit out. And being raised as a Jehovah's Witness, you also learn to tune yourself out because, Jehovah's feelings matter and yours don't. And there's all kinds of things that are bad and wrong about you and all that sort of thing. But, we'd be at this, me, my younger brother, and my sister would be getting ready to go in the bank. And I'd be like, hey, guys, we need to be really good. Mom's having a bad day. If we're too loud in the bank, she might cry. And, and so it was very much like as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I was taking emotional responsibility for my mom. So, and then I never fit into the like male hierarchy in school. And what's funny about like diving into red pill is it's like there's some truth to it. like, especially if I look back at like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, the way the boys sort of stack rank themselves, you know, and there'll be like
Yeah.
3 or 4 quote unquote like alpha males at the top, and then like a bunch of kiss asses, right? I mean, kind of like, you know, our current presidency. But
Yeah.
yeah, like there'll be a bunch of kiss asses, like 5 or 6 kind of like hovering beneath those guys, and then all the rest of the guys kind of just sort of like, hey, as long as the top 3 or 4 don't notice me, like I won't get picked on, you know, and it's sort of like just kind of go along with it, do their own thing. And then, you know, you have like 3 or 4 of us on the bottom who are sort of just open season for any time one of the dominant males is having a bad day. Like, let's just go take a shit on RC for the afternoon type of thing. And so that was kind of my experience. And I think, you know, the little bit of time that I kind of got interested in Red Pill, I was like, hell yeah, I want to be one of the guys on the top for once. You know, like I'm sick of this shit. I've been this way since I was in junior high, you know? So, yeah, like as far as stereotypical masculinity, like I never felt it. And so when I got outside of the religion, I definitely was kind of on a search for like, who am I? What do I really want to be like? And one of my experiences was sort of just, you know, you have this identity shift when you leave the religion and you got to figure out who you are. And so a part of me was like, you know, how passive was I because of this religion? And how much of this like Mr. Nice Guy kind of like part of my personality is really me? And how much have I sort of like, you know, domesticated myself or like chilled myself out because, you know, Jesus loved everybody. And, you know, he wept when he resurrected Lazarus. So it's okay for men to cry. And I had a dad who was very much like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to show your feelings, but never told me like, hey, if somebody punches you, turn around and beat the crap out of them because bullies won't stop. Like, you know, that would have been fantastic, you know?
Right.
So that was kind of my experience. And then when I got married, you know, what's funny is she and I'd had this conversation about headship beforehand. And I was just like, look, like behind closed doors, just like, let's just be equals. You know, like if we gotta like do the simple, like, you know, I'm like, Jesus like washed the feet of his disciples. So
Yeah.
like he was
gay
the
as
head,
hell, honestly.
yeah. So like he was the head of the disciples. Like, so I, you know, I feel like as far as a married guy, it's weird being in a patriarchal religion and then saying like you kind of didn't feel like you were in charge. But I kind of felt like there was a lot of stuff where I don't know. I'm trying to think of the most diplomatic way to say this because my ex-wife and I are still friends today, and she's not a horrible person. But I would say that between the childhood experiences and then like as it manifested in my marriage, is like I had a fear of her being upset with me a lot. Like a lot of my thoughts of like what it was like while I was married was like, oh, Sharice is going to be mad. Oh, I screwed up. Oh, I did this. I did that. And I attribute that to 2 people who were very incompatible and should have, you know, never even got married to begin with. And we were
Which is a common experience in
we were in a cult. Like she was just as trapped as I was. Like she, you know, there's plenty of behavior that I could put a finger on and complain about from my ex-wife, but at the end of the day, like she had no option. You know, if she could have left, she would have, you know? And so we were both captive members of this organization, captive in our marriage. And so there was a lot of, you know, there was a lot of scarring and pain and hurt to work through after leaving the religion, not just from the shunning, but just starting to try to make sense of how much I had not really actually asserted myself or had any standards or asked for what I wanted or really felt like I was happy in any relationship. And so that's kind of where it's just like, oh, these guys, they have this approach and it's based in evolutionary psychology. And like, I believe in evolution. Evolution helped me break out of the cult. Evolution's real. Evolutionary psychology. Yeah. Like, let's figure out how we evolve.
Peanut butter and jelly.
yeah, let's figure out how we evolve to mate. And like, then I'll just like apply the evolutionary psychology lens to dating and relationships. So it's I feel like it's very seductive. There's a sort of like ex-Jehovah's Witness or ex-evangelical, and then you're an atheist and you believe in evolution, and then you hear about this evolutionary psychology approach. And it's a very seductive pipeline because, again, you're looking for rules. Like
Yeah,
your
and
brain and your nervous system is wired for someone to say, like, here's the roadmap, just follow the rules and everything will work out the way you want it to. And to turn around and just actually make up your own rules is very scary. And so someone comes along and like, here's the framework, here's the scaffolding, just follow this sort of like recipe. And you don't have to sit here and figure it all out on your own anymore. It's a very seductive sell.
yeah, no, and that is what it is, a cell of a narrative and a personality that you can have, and you will be in this circle. And I have been setting aside many comments. We've had really great comments, and so I will be referring to them when I remember to. And also, I think we'll do some comment catch up later. But Chandler said, you get to feel safe for evading reality, safety in the group until the creeping emptiness from that consumes you, which I think is very well.
Applicable in a lot of those situations.
I'm going to, oh yes, X-Cult Baby says one of the things conspiracies and cults have in common is making you feel special, like you know something most people don't, which I think is...
That's very true. I mean, it's literally
absolutely
called Red Pill after the Matrix, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
here's the secret.
Yeah, here's the secret. Take the red pill. You're never going to be the same once you see how reality
find
actually
out
works. Yeah,
the truth. Do you want to know the truth about what's really going on, folks? And maybe I'll use this to jump into my relationship with this as a Jehovah's Witness. But Jenny Bloom says a lot of ex-JW men struggle outside of their religion because they have the expectation of power and authority that the religion gives them, but the real world knocks them down a bracket or two. So
that's very real. I would even take it a step further, and I would say, you know, up until the age of 38, I was invested in a social hierarchy and got good at it and played by the rules and had this like approval and credit and, oh, your husband's such a spiritual man, you must be so happy and blah 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 blah. And you just go from that. You're nobody after that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So this is kind of what I felt like I had to wrestle with afterward, because my self-perception, I like you, never felt like I fit into a traditional masculine hierarchy in any way, because I was not athletic, not a jock type, and I was always interested in like artsy fartsy stuff. At school from a young age, like I didn't have a lot of guy friends at school for some reason. Well, part of it I'm now realizing is that from a very young age, I don't ever remember having a ew, girls are gross cooties phase. I only ever remember thinking girls were beautiful and awesome, and I wanted to be around them. That was my experience.
It's so funny because I swear if you and I had met in middle school, we would have been buddies. I agree. I had like two other little guy friends. Have you remember Pound Puppies?
Oh my God. I think about Pound Puppies all the time because
I had this other like sweet, like little, like tender guy friend who brought Pound Puppies with him to school. And like all the other kids made fun of him for it. And like, you're bringing dolls to school. And I was like, he's nice. Like all the other boys don't like me. I'm going to go hang out with this guy, you know?
Okay. So as you were saying that, I caught a glimpse of my own bookshelf in the like preview of the screen or whatever. And the bookshelf is kind of an interesting testament to like the totally schizophrenic, masculinity that I had, which is like, you know, currently I'll say for the record that I identify as bisexual, and that's something that I discovered probably more when I was like going through puberty and stuff, or I guess maybe a little bit before. But like behind me is like Jane Austen books, John Green, and James Bond novels by Ian Fleming, and like So I just never had a clear one way or the other. But I had to kind of, throughout my experience as a Jehovah's Witness, I always viewed myself as like a feminist, and which is silly because no, you're not if you're a Jehovah's Witness. But I genuinely, an early doubt of mine that upset me just because I really liked my teachers in my elementary school. They were all so wonderful, and they were all great about, they liked that I was a kid who liked to read, so I liked being in their class, right? And so I just it struck me one day that we had no women giving talks at the congregation. I was very young, and I asked my parents, like, why don't the sisters give talks? And mom and dad were like, well, the Apostle Paul said that women are not to teach in the congregation. I was like, well, but school teachers, all my teachers at school are women, and they're really good teachers. And like, I knew that my mom was a really good teacher because she taught me how to read.
Yeah.
So I always, like, my self-perception was like, I don't have that issue. Like, I don't have a misogyny issue. What
Yeah.
misogyny? Couldn't be me. And I think when I started to have to come to grips with it was in leaving, and what you were talking about, having to kind of reconstruct your entire identity from, I am a cog in this machine. I know exactly where I fit. I'm good at it. This is where all my friends are. It's where I get praise, and there's a ladder to climb, whatever. And it is the entitlement to a certain level of or expectation of power and authority. I don't think that this affected my marriage too much in terms of how I treated Christina, but what I started to notice myself doing when I was deconstructing and was then physically in, mentally out. Like, I was stuck in the religion, but I didn't believe it. Well, I obviously wanted Christina to be on the same page as me because I love my wife, and but I started to have this frustration, like, well, but she believes in the headship. Shouldn't she be listening to me? Like, what's her excuse for not listening to her husband? Like, I had those kinds of thoughts.
Yeah.
And I also had to deal with the fact that I really had, because within Jehovah's Witnesses, your relationship with women is totally judged by everybody in the group as to, like, are you getting too close? Are you guys dating? Are you flirting? If you text like more than once a day, you're
Yeah.
flirting or you're dating.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have any normal relationships with any women. Like, all of my, like, female friends in the religion ended up being people that I, like, had a crush on or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I had to reckon with too, is that, like, I didn't think that I had an issue with viewing just even friendships as, like, potential, I don't know, sexual objects or something. But I did. I did have to wrestle with that. I did not have a red pill phase, but I did have the
Yeah.
experience of, like, recognizing some internal misogyny issues that began to affect my life and other people's lives, and I needed to reckon with it a little bit. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm coming
And I
from.
think
And
I think I came
yeah.
from from a little bit slightly different place. I had kind of mentioned my mom being sort of volatile the way she was, and for me, I had this, like, perfect family narrative that reinforced the whole, like, weaker vessel thing, because that was kind of what I saw, was, like, a lot of, like, emotional fragility. And then I
Ah.
think it was actually, like, being married. What was funny is when I got married, I went the other way. I was like, I wanted someone that I thought was, like, very, like, even keeled and rational. And I think a lot of getting, like, let's just put it, I'll just put it this way. My wife checked me a lot. Like,
Mm.
if I was full of shit, she's just like, no. And in, like, 10 seconds, like, this is why you're wrong. And I was like, oh dang, she's right, you know. And so like that
Yeah.
was kind of, and I remember one time there was like a kind of way that my dad used to joke with my mom that I would never do now. But like, you know, I was like
Mm.
26, 27, and like the family's over there, my dad's doing his little joke, and my wife turned to me and she's like, you are never to do that to me, just so you know. That's not
Yeah.
funny. So
Yeah.
that for me was kind of like when I started having to, you know, I mean, relationships bring out your dark side and expose it to light and tell and
They
show
do.
you where you're fucked up, you know. And
Yeah.
you either like get with the program and work on yourself, or the relationship fails.
Totally. You know, one thing we should do, because there was a comment that I think I want to circle back around to towards the end. Um, but somebody commented something along the lines of, well, what does masculinity even mean? And I genuinely have a hard time defining it. I think it is like what people say about like pornography. Like, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And it means different things to different people. But I think that the issue that you get in a cult, or at the very least a toxic social group that is detrimental to your mental health, is essentialization. Like they are going to
Yeah.
essentialize, like, this is the way you have to be a man. Like, there's alpha males and there's beta males. Beta, bad. You don't want to be like that. What you want to be is this. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, when you are studying and getting ensconced in the group, you are encouraged to put on the new personality. And genuinely, if you've watched any of my videos where I talk about the Jehovah's Witness speaker guys, they all kind of sound the same. And that is because there is genuinely a kind of personality you're supposed to put on. And I see this in the red pill influencer sphere, where all these guys sound like different shades of Andrew Tate. Like, some are a little bit more Tate. There's a little bit less Tate there, but it's all kind of variations of that. They're saying very similar things, using very similar language to reach the exact same conclusion.
Yeah, and you know the thing that I keep coming back to is it's like there's a grain of truth. There's a lot of truth in a lot of it, and so what happens is it's like there's like a little piece of something where you go, oh, that is true, and then it's
Yeah.
wrapped in this like awful like wrapping that comes, yeah, comes along. So like, you know, the Andrew Tate and stuff is like, you know, go get a job, be responsible, be
Yeah.
disciplined, work out, eat healthy, drink water, take care of yourself.
Right.
And also women are the reason for all of your problems. And
Right. It
it's
is.
like you were right up until the last part. You were actually helping people. And
It's for
then,
the same.
you know, and
It's
it's
for the
like
same
the
reason.
same thing happens with JWs where like I
Yes.
don't know if you've ever noticed this, but like they rip off like psychology, you know. So when they do this, like how to like have keep your family healthy or how to have good communication, and they're just ripping off the Gottman's research, and
Yeah.
they're ripping off all of like this, you know, science, and then they like pull it into a Watchtower article and glue a couple scriptures on that sort of like halfway kind of almost sound like they're saying the thing, but really you can tell that it's not coming from the Bible. Like some Watchtower writer just really loved this subject and really did some research, and it's mostly secular advice. And it's a
Yeah.
similar thing with I think a lot of these like red pill. Scientology is a similar thing. Folks will report that it's like they give you these personality tests, and then they're like Scientology improves your life for a little while, you know,
Yeah.
and then it goes downhill. And like red pill gives you this sort of like, you know, let's figure out like how to be happy and lead a good life and sort of excel at things, and that builds confidence. But it comes with a bunch of other stuff that you don't notice when you first are if you're not kind of aware of what you're reading, and the emotional manipulation kind of piece of it is really gets really gross, you know.
Yeah. Like that. I've been trying to work up a video where I tried and analyzed what a cult is, but like not using the bite model, like just trying to use plain language and stuff. And the one common thread that I think is a truism is that the on ramp is always basic common sense advice that is not controversial. Like for the most part, most of these groups are like, you know what's good? Community and helping other people. Like, yeah, you know what's
Yeah.
good? Being a better person, being kinder to others. Maybe you've got some
And
addiction that's destroying you.
yeah,
You should get over that. We
exactly,
can help you with that.
exactly.
None of those are the things that are
Like,
cult
yeah,
like, you know.
people find Jesus and they stop taking drugs and they clean up their life, but it doesn't. There are other ways to do that.
Yes, exactly. And it's like you can be a follower of Jesus without being a follower of what some guy is telling you Jesus means when he says
Yeah,
stuff. And like nobody is joining Jehovah's Witnesses because of the kinds of like clips that I would dissect on this channel that are like really crazy. That's not the kind of public facing stuff that they are like
exactly.
showing you when they
It's
knock on
all
your
it's all the
door.
happy feel good stuff, and like this
Yeah.
is what your life could be like, and you can have everything you want, and you can live in paradise, and it's a very similar ploy.
Yeah, and like Joe Rogan, I think is somebody who is at the very least sort of like a guru type, like cult of personality type. I think in his own little Rogan sphere, he's a cult leader or a ringleader at the very least. And the reason why people like Joe Rogan is the stuff that he says that isn't crazy. And it's like, yeah, you can absolutely find Joe Rogan saying totally reasonable things that normal people agree with. That's not the reason why people don't like Joe Rogan. And it's like the reason why I left Jehovah's Witnesses is not because of all of their totally anodyne articles on why it's good to like get regular exercise and stuff. Like that's not the thing that's the
Yeah,
problem. And
exactly.
frankly, a lot of their advice for marriage is not that terrible these days. Back in the day, not so great, but now it really is like, don't be quick to anger, sit down and talk about things. It's like, yeah, that is totally fine advice. But the thing that is weird about Jehovah's Witnesses is the weaker vessel. Men are the head, and you are not allowed to have any. You're not allowed to teach in the congregation. That's
I
the thing.
think I think that there's a similar experience. Like you join Jehovah's Witnesses and you get love bombed is the other thing, right? And I think going back to
Yes.
mentioning bell hooks at the beginning is, there's a lot of, uh, I think that there's a lot to be said for the conversation of like we haven't like men, we as men have not adapted to the way the world has changed quick enough. So, for example, it's hard to go out and find safe guys to be emotionally vulnerable with,
Yeah.
right? So I think what happens is women have pretty good social networks, and we don't have to get into whether that's biological or socially constructed. It might be a little bit of both. It might be more of one than the other. I don't know, but I do know that like for whether it's nature or nurture, like we as guys kind of struggle for that. And I think that's the appeal of going online and starting to talk about your struggles. And it's because it's such a niche community. It's immediately like, I hear you, brother, same thing. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And so it's just kind of like this instant sense of belonging. I never, like, the moment I saw the forums, I was like, this is, I mean, I was in my 40s too. So it's like,
Yeah.
because it really,
Yeah.
it really struck me as, somebody was saying earlier, this is pretty good basic advice. I think that the other part of the equation is also like either maturity or having mature male role models. Because
Yeah.
it is pretty basic advice. Like, go get a job, take care of yourself, be disciplined. But it is also the case that like some of that stuff needs to be internalized because you have somebody older than you that's sort of putting it into you when you're younger. And if you don't have that, so I think in a sense, it's almost like you're kind of looking for someone to sort of fill a sort of like fatherly role, like, hey son, get off your ass and get some shit done, you know? And
Yeah.
there are other avenues, you know. There, in fact, I personally think that self-compassion is better than get off your ass. And it's
Yeah.
sort of like let's dig into the underlying emotions behind my hesitancy to be productive and get things done. Like, am I not in alignment with the goals that I'm pursuing? Like, if I can't force
Yeah.
myself to get this stuff done, maybe I don't actually care about it enough, you know? So like, that's kind of something I want to talk about from the perspective of, here's where you can go wrong. And here's where I think it completely messes things up, right?
Yeah.
Is it's a performance.
Yes.
So let's just say that we were raised to believe that our identity is provider. And
Yeah.
now we're in a time in capitalism where it's very rare that you can be the provider. It's got to be 50-50.
Yeah. The sole breadwinner.
Yeah, we've got to make peace with that, and we've got to find a new identity outside of provider.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is, but I know that what I think is one possibility is, women have been talking about this in feminism for years, decentering like male attention and decentering this sort of like, I have to be married and I have to be partnered to have worth. And I think that's one thing, is like, what if you were to spend a few years just going, well, what hobbies do I like? What job would I do if I wanted, like, what job would I want to do? What lights me up? And I think one of the traps of some of these ideas from Red Pill is it really does center you around crafting a persona for one purpose, which is to attract a mate. What happens if you actually succeed at getting that 6-figure income and crafting that sort of perfect persona, but you didn't do it because you wanted it? You didn't do it because it was you. You did it because this is what somebody told you needed to become in order to attract a mate. Well, first of all, like for me, that was way too close to what I did in the religion. Just like, no more performance, right? Being a spiritual man was a performance, and then this stuff felt like a performance. But like, if you're kind of young and impressionable, and let's just say you get into your mid-20s and you've got the 6-figure income, but it comes at the cost of an 80-hour, 60-hour work week, whatever. You get married, you have selected somebody who found that attractive in you, and you start burning out and realizing, this is not the life I wanted.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. When you say, this is not what I want, it's, you've kind of set yourself up, because your partner that you selected chose you for the, you created a persona, and then you found somebody that wanted that persona, and now you don't want to play the persona anymore. So what do? Versus you go out and figure out who you are, figure out what you like, cultivate a sense of personal identity that is separate from who I can attract and all of that sort of thing. And you just bump into somebody one day, and you are who you are already.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to touch on a couple of things you said. I was actually making some notes. So one of the things that you mentioned is the lack of societal response to just the change that have happened. I don't know, socially, demographically, whatever. It reminds me of a very famous book by political scientist Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone. And Bowling Alone is this book that basically charts the start of loneliness and the degradation of society and institutions with bowling leagues. Men used to be, maybe you were in a bowling league, maybe you were in a local men's club of some other kinds, but there did used to be institutions, not from the government, but just as a society, we were focused on human connection. And as that began to go away, this kind of existential who am I stuff started to seep in, the kind of isolation and the difficulty finding friendships. And I think there's also something to be said for the fact that our jobs are not very social for the most part. You know, most people don't have a job where they're interacting a lot with their coworkers, especially if you work remotely or from home. And maybe you do, but you work in a cubicle, or it's so busy and loud that you can't actually stop and talk to anybody. There are, I think the way to kind of reclaim this kind of thing, pardon me, is just to be the person to take the first step to just like make more friends, because everybody needs, like,
Yeah.
everybody knows, like every guy knows that it is hard to make friends with other guys for exactly what you said, that you can't trust every dude to be open with you, because not all people are compatible. And there are guys who are going to, if you're feeling some type of way, they'll call you gay, or they'll make you feel like shit. And this is
Yeah.
where I wanted to, maybe we can talk about this, is like patriarchy is not good for men. And what you said that I wrote down was like the red pill type and other sort of manosphere type trajectories. The one purpose is for you to find a mate. I actually think, that is the sell to the men, but I don't think that is what the sellers are actually doing. Like Andrew Tate doesn't give a shit about any of the like
Oh my gosh.
teenagers and 20-year olds.
Have you seen the video of Andrew Tate talking about when he ran a webcam service?
Yes.
Like he's laughing at how he took advantage of these lonely, sad men.
Oh yeah.
Like
I mean, he is.
just mocking them. And I'm like, these are the
Oh yeah.
people that you market yourself to now, but 5 years ago you were just fleecing them for tens of thousands of dollars. He's a
Like, what do,
despicable human being.
earlier you said like uh being manipulated by the governing body, like you started noticing the kind of subjugation, whatever. And the governing body doesn't actually care if you have a happy
Well,
life at all.
I
They care
wonder.
about you being a good soldier for the group. And in my opinion,
Yeah.
what those people, maybe some, they're just trying to make money, but there are also ideologues who don't really care about whether or not you find a mate. What they want is a good soldier for the machine that they're building. The capitalists, we're just in full-blown fascism in the United States. Like, that's the machine that they want to put you in.
Can you put that chart screenshot?
Yes.
So there's a book called Whole Brain Living that kind of breaks down these four quadrants of the left and right brain. And down at the bottom left corner, character 2, left emotional, reactive, fear-based, zero-sum thinking, survival, social dominance, obsessed. When we get into these conversations about how people behave, and some people bring in evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology, a lot of times what you're reading about in red pill ideology is very much this left emotional brain, this very reactive. And this is the part of the brain that becomes activated when you feel like a sense of scarcity, when you're suffering grief and loss, when you're afraid, when you're in a survival state. And so what red pill will hook into is this idea that everything in life is about social dominance, right? Everything in life is a zero sum game for survival. For folks that aren't familiar, zero sum thinking is, if I win, you lose. If you win, I lose. It's you versus me, one or the other, right? And we can take it off the screen, but like the point of the video, the point of the book is like there's these other parts of but like the reason I bring it up is like there's other parts of the brain, like there's other modes of being besides this like scarcity, survival based, fear based mindset. But one of the problems I think is when you come out of a religion and you get shunned, and maybe you lose your marriage in the process, and you have no family, you have no friends, you have no social support. Maybe there's financial repercussions, and you have no framework for like what the rules for living your life are, or how to get, it's a very vulnerable period in your life. And so, I mean, if there's anything I can express to other people in that position is like, look, your pain is real. Like your suffering is real. If you've been relationally wounded in the past, like that's all real. There are other avenues though for finding your way out of that headspace. And the problem is like this sort of obsession with inferiority over superiority and social hierarchy and resource acquisition and peacocking and broadcasting your status and all of this sort of thing. This is a survival mindset, and you don't have to live this way. Like you can heal yourself out of this frame of reference and have a different life that brings in like creative energy and flow and joy and deep bonds and a vulnerability and intimacy. And so one of the problems that I have with some of this is like, you know, what you talked about, and I think we brought it up, biological essentialism. This idea that it's like, okay, well, if we look at some of these survival mechanisms in the human brain that evolved this way and that way and the other way, and it's like, yeah, but we also evolved like social instincts and cooperation, and you know, we care for the elderly. You know, we care for our sick. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, my bad. Like I said, we're tribal. We're tribal animals.
Yeah, like we're not. It's not purely me versus you, us versus them. This is a very specific frame of reference. And the problem when I was saying that it reminds me of what the governing body does is because the governing body in authoritarian systems, they function off of keeping you off center. Like if you're still and centered and settled within yourself and confident and calm and sort of like, I'm okay, right? I feel safe. I feel centered. I feel okay. None of this shit works on you. And so what happens is, you know, the governing body, for example, they have to have it over your head. Armageddon, shunning, right? Like bad things will happen. The world will chew you up and spit you out. They have to have you in that sort of like part of the brain that's constant. And then what are you doing? Am I spiritual enough? Am I this enough? And it's constant striving, going. And those hooks, like they can go away and you can get into a different mode of existence that is not survival based. It's not status based. It's not will people, you know, what strategy do I need to employ to be loved? It doesn't have to be that way. It really does not.
Yeah. Like we are like, we need each other. The mantra that you don't owe anybody anything is like toxic and shitty and just factually incorrect. I've been trying not to use the word toxic too much, but like what I mean by that is like human babies are so much more helpless and vulnerable than other mammals. Like there are animals who they poop out a baby, and if that thing doesn't walk in 5 seconds, they're like, okay, screw you, we don't care about you. That is not how humans are.
Birds pushing their babies out of the nests and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
We are very reliant on each other. And what cults do is like the red pill thing is very individualistic, which is different from Jehovah's Witnesses. But Jehovah's Witnesses and red pill groups, all cults, there is an in group and an out group. And that performance aspect you were talking about, you have to act a certain way, present a certain way, and live a certain way in order to stay in the in group. But if your in group is just humans who aren't trying to murder you, then you're going to be a lot more chill. I don't know if that made any sense. I wanted to just, if I may, go on a slightly
the biological essentialism is it just eugenics? Can we talk absolutely. About? So I want to. This is spot on. Biological essentialism is the doorway to eugenics. It's the doorway to white supremacy. It's the doorway to colonization. like this
to an autism registry in the United States.
The idea is, so there was this idea at one point where it was like the blank slate theory, which is children are a blank slate. You just write whatever you want on the slate. You're born with a child is born a blank slate, and whatever you want to teach it, like that's who it becomes. And biological essentialism is the opposite, which is we are slaves to our biology. Essentialism being like there's an essence or an essential aspect to our biology that's just inescapable. And so you have these two extremes, and neither of them's true. Blank slate theory has been disproven, and biological essentialism is not true. Like, we are a combination of genes and environment, but we also have some choice over it. And I think the perfect example of this is like going back to that survival mindset and talking about the part of the brain that gets activated during survival mode. That's also the part of the brain that villainizes and dehumanizes, right?
Yes.
So
I'm going to keep this up here for a bit.
Okay. So she breaks it. This is a neurobiologist that wrote this book. It's called Whole Brain Living. It's fantastic. And if you're kind of wanting to dabble even in like some form of spirituality that doesn't like contradict science, she talks about the parts of the brain that are responsible for spiritual experience and sort of like how that works and what the mechanism are. But the character 2, the left emotional brain, this is the part your amygdala fires up when you are just not feeling safe. I don't have it listed here, but dehumanization and villainization is part of that response. So like genocide is built into the human brain, but we don't have to commit genocide, right? Like we can choose. And so what happens with biological, this is kind of like biological essentialist worldviews. It's like, well, this is who we are. This is how we evolved. And it's like, so women tend to be hypergamous. They want to date across and up socially, and they want to date across and up financially. And men are looking for beauty standards that show youthfulness and the ability to like bear many children. And there's this whole logic to it. And again, it's like, we prioritize things differently based on whether we're in a place of survival and scarcity or we're in a place of openness and expansiveness. When you're in a place of survival and scarcity and you don't have access to resources and you're barely surviving, yes, more resources is always good. And your priorities change toward resource acquisition, and that's going to influence your dating approach possibly. But to pretend like the fact that we evolved these reflexes means this is who we are, this is the whole picture of who we are, and this is all we're capable of, like that's where they miss the boat. You can get society can get to a place, individuals can get to a place, like we don't have to be in this survival place where we prioritize these things. And that's kind of the thing that I think is the allure of Red Pill, is like, if you have been out in the world and met people and dealt with hierarchies at work and dominance games and all of this nonsense, that people act this way. That there's some truth here. And I'm not saying like, you're not crazy if you've noticed this and then you've jumped into Red Pill and you're like, yes, somebody else noticed it. You're not wrong. Our presidential election is proof that people can be this way, and that it appeals to large groups of people. I'm just saying, like, there are other options. There are other ways of living. There are other parts of your brain that you can inhabit and access. And there are ways of dealing with that, the trauma and the past and the effects of getting shunned and all of that. There are ways to work through that, and you can return back to this, the stillness and the being settled and being calm and having a sort of quiet confidence. And you don't have to play this alpha bro character.
Yeah. What I like about this, other than that it says dominance instead of dominance, is that
that's what I get for using an AI.
Oh, AI, gosh damn it. No, okay. So what I like about this is that, this is a brain. It's not left right political ideology. This is your brain functions and stuff, the left right brain thing. And all of our brains have all of this stuff in there. And what a cult leader or grifter, manosphere personality or just person who's wrong is going to try and tell you is that the brain is only some of these things. But humans are full of contradictions. We're not just one thing.
We're not. We're many parts.
And like you said, our environment, like global factors, a lot of us realize different things about ourselves in the pandemic when we were forced to be isolated. Maybe we found hobbies that we wouldn't have otherwise found. Maybe we found bad things about ourselves too. I think a lot of people, I mean, in fact, I know a lot of people started turning to conspiracy theories during that time because historically, during times of uncertainty, that is when these things rise. Like the reason why the JFK assassination was such a hotbed of conspiracies wasn't just because it was a presidential assassination, but because it represented a massive uncertainty for the country right in the middle of the civil rights movement and everything. And, that's not necessarily the case for every single event in human history. And so I think the key to getting rid of what might be called toxic masculinity and replacing it with something more positive is getting rid of the notion that anyone is or has to be one way or that they can be, because what the fascists do is they acknowledge that people are different and they say, well, that is why we must get rid of the different people. We must simply get rid of them, legislate them, move them, disappear them in the middle of the night, send them to rehabilitation camps, whatever. But it is coexistence on one side versus no, we just got to get rid of them on the other side. And it applies to how they view women.
The question of like, what is masculinity? I think there's a truth there. And I think we're in a period of time that's very weird, and we're going to have more conversations and figure that out, because I think in 50 years, we're going to look back and we're going to say that the non-binary folks did us a huge favor and just sort of like burst open this whole illusion to begin with. But it is interesting because like,
I have a comment to that.
It seems like we do have an idea that like femininity is real. And when you say like toxic masculinity, I know what that is. But when you say like, what is positive masculinity? Anything I could call positive masculinity, someone would be like, are you saying women can't do that? Right. So like, I don't know when guys are like, well, what is positive masculinity? But like the thing I come back to is like, man, I don't know I don't know exactly how to say, oh, this is masculine, but I know what it's not. Like, it's not King Joffrey from Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? Like,
right. It's not being an impetuous child or a bloodthirsty egomaniac, like, or maybe masculinity can be this thing.
Jon Snow. How about Jon Snow? Like personal sacrifice for the greater good, or like, I heard someone say like, if society is structured as a patriarchy still, or society is still structured so that there are privileges, power, and given to men by virtue of being a man, then at the very least, healthy masculinity is using the privileges, power, and abilities given to you in service of others rather than to take from, harm, or bully others at bare minimum. So like if we're going to associate masculinity with like strength or power or position or authority or whatever, at the bare minimum, then it would be in service of the greater good, in service of others, helping others, using what resources and strength and power and position you have by virtue of being a man, not for selfish gain. I think that would be kind of the direction I would go with that.
My contention, and after I say this, I do want to get to a comment that I thought was really great, but shit, let me go just get to that because I totally lost what I was going to say. But so Lowe says, to offer a PMO transmasc perspective, you almost wish you could pass, meaning passes the gender your gender identity, as there is a very laid out social script you can follow, but then there's also the misogyny you're expected to perform. And I think this is kind of I think this is really important in terms of why patriarchy is bad for men. One thing I want to do, I know that you had a video that.
Oh no, I you know what? I ended up not pulling that out.
No,
well,
no, but I was just going to say, yeah, there's some videos, like, I want to kind of link in the description later, because
for
you
sure.
mentioned that Münecat one that's really good. One of my favorite videos on this topic is by the patron saint of the channel, whose entire vibe I totally ripped off from my early videos, is YouTuber Shaun, just Shaun. He makes great deep dive videos into a lot of different things, but he did a video on Andrew Tate and what it means to be a man and stuff. And in order to demonstrate this, he used something that is coming up in chat a lot for some reason, and also in my brain all the time, which is The Sopranos. I love The Sopranos. I didn't watch it when I was a witness because I was too scared, but I watched it after leaving, and now I've rewatched it a lot. And what Shaun goes into is this scene in The Sopranos where Tony Soprano, the main mob boss guy, is in therapy. That's the kind of conceit of The Sopranos. He's a mob boss, but he gets panic attacks, so he has to go to therapy, so he doesn't die, basically. But it's a huge shameful secret for him, because the mob, he was less of a man if you go to therapy.
Yeah.
But one thing he's wrestling with in this one episode is there's somebody on his team who's gay. And this was a secret, but now it is known to other people in the family. And they're very homophobic, and so they want to kill this gay guy. And Tony is lamenting this because the gay guy Vito is one of his best workers. Throughout the conversation, he says the stuff he is supposed to say as a mob boss. But when Dr. Melfi starts pushing him on, like, do you actually, like, care about this? He's like, no, I don't, I guess I don't actually care, but they care.
Yeah.
It's a tall fucking order. If I got, to try and get them to be accepting. And so this is making Tony miserable. And it's making everybody miserable because,
the like mocking gay folks, or just generally like the way he's like trying to be tough.
Yeah, the performance of, like, hey, to be a tough guy, you can't be fucking Vanook up in here, like that kind of thing.
I've never seen Sopranos. That's kind of interesting.
It's the best show about.
Is this like an ongoing thing in the show, like him getting therapy because he's?
Oh yeah, that's the whole conceit. I mean, I think The Sopranos.
Now I want to watch it. That sounds fantastic.
I think it is the best show on.
I thought it was a generic mob show, and I
thought so too. I thought so too, but it's literature. It's amazing, and yeah, like Breaking Bad is very, very similar in that it is a show, and there is a key scene where Walter White wants to get out of the game. He's like, you know what? I genuinely have a chance to rebuild my family. I think I'm out. But this guy really wants Walter White's amazing meth. And so what's the pitch he makes to him? A man provides.
Oh, yeah.
I'm giving you the chance. Gus tells him, this is what it is to be a man. And that is the thing that speaks to why. And that is what consistently pulls him back in, is this thing, this thing. And it's not, I think that, that show is kind of about Walter White embracing the fact that he is a sociopath. But
just to be straight up, like seriously, we talked about feeling kind of inferior or having like low self-esteem. Like I think one of the psychological hooks that guys need to be aware of is using a relationship to boost your self-esteem.
Oh, yes.
And specifically, like, you talked about the performance for the guys, like we've all been through this. I shouldn't say we've all been through this. I know I've like experienced this when I was married, where it's like someone meets you and your wife walks up and they're like, "Oh yeah, dude, good job, man. Oh, you're good." You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
it's like I had women do this. Oh my God.
Nicely done.
Your wife is so beautiful. And I was like sitting there, like my little mildly autistic self, like I don't have a social script for a woman complimenting my wife's beauty and saying nothing about her personality. Like I just stood there like a deer in the headlights. and I've had this experience with guys where they're like, you're talking to this guy and this guy, and it's like this person's girlfriend shows up, and then it's like, are you seeing anybody? Oh yeah, you got any pictures? You show them a picture, and it's like, oh cool, dude, like you're doing good.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
you really do need to take a step back and think about that. Like that is, because if you can, first of all, like there's the perspective, the woman's perspective, like who wants to be just that, right? And so like that's the most obvious thing that I don't want to overlook. But from the male perspective is just like, imagine having a self-worth that exists independent of external signaling.
Yeah.
Like
I think,
if you can do that, you are truly free. That's when you don't have to do anything you don't want to do anymore.
Yeah. Are you saying what you think, or are you saying what you heard someone else say and you thought it was cool, and so now you're saying it? Like,
what do you mean? Oh, like yeah.
The social script thing that you're saying, makes a lot of sense to me, because that's always my advice, slight tangent, to people who want to like reach Jehovah's Witnesses, who kind of want to, maybe they got a family member or someone just starts knocking at their door and they're like, you know what, I want to try and wake this person up. Well, you can't really do that. But the best thing, because people can only change their own minds. Like you can't take someone else's mind and be like, nah, here's what I'm going to do. Like, what I say is you have to get them off script. You have to ask them questions that they are not used to being asked. They're not used to being asked it in that way. There are things that Jehovah's Witnesses have a script for. Like if somebody, whatever kind of Christian you are, and this is why the Christian XJWs drive me crazy. I love you. I do. But when it comes to the art of persuasion, you know that Jehovah's Witnesses have an answer for all of that stuff.
I'm just going to say, if you substituted Armageddon for Hellfire,
you suck.
There's some things. Yeah. There's some things I'm just like, no.
Yes. Like, oh wow, hell is real. Awesome. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay, so I was in the wrong group, but okay, now I'm in the right group and I can talk.
Yeah, because it's like, what's for, I guess, for me, what's the point if you still live in fear? Like, what was the point of leaving the JWs? And I just found like another thing to be afraid of all the time,
I think, you mentioned that earlier. That was one of my notes, that a lot of your interactions were based on.
I got kind of carried away talking about authoritarianism. I forgot the other end of it is like the whole thing about being like fear-based and all of that stuff. Like if you start diving into Red Pill, it is also about teaching you, the man, how to instill fear in your partner. Yes. Like that's the part that really gets fucked up. Like all of these little psychological tricks. And it's like, I learned about this stuff from a couple of books about psychology when I was slowly exiting out of Jehovah's Witnesses. And then and it was sort of from a perspective of like how to be aware of this so that you don't get duped and pulled in. So then to see in Red Pill that they're teaching basically Machiavellian, narcissistic and sociopathic behavior traits as like how to model your behavior.
Yeah.
On purpose, because of the effect it will have on your partner.
Right.
It's mind blowing. And
they should be in subjection to you.
And it's sold to you as this is evolutionary psychology. Their brain thinks that it wants you to be nice to them, but actually they will respond better to this instead, which again, I just go back to like, this is trauma. This is just traumatized men and traumatized women. One of my female friends I was talking to about this, she used to be a dating coach for a hot minute.
Wow.
But she was kind of she was kind of into all of this stuff as it was developing in pickup communities and all of this stuff. And she was just telling me that, she started looking into it, and kind of implemented some of it, and it just kind of dawned on her after a little bit, like, this is not going to get you a partner who is like, this is not going to get you intimacy.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is not gonna, like, this might get somebody's attention who also is in this sort of like survival state and not doing well themselves, but it's not going to get you the kind of like deep intimacy you want. It's not going to create stability and safety and trust and all of those things that you want to have in a relationship. And so she got grossed out by it real quick as she started digging deeper. It was just like, oh, this is all predicated on destabilizing the other person is what this is. And that's what I mean when I say it's like, it's the same thing the governing body is doing to Jehovah's Witnesses. It's saying like, okay, well, we're going to teach you men how to destabilize your partners. And then, one of the other experiences I didn't get to is like, I had, the reason I got exposed to this is I had worldly roommates for the first time, freshly divorced, and trying to do the thing of like, yeah, man, let me just talk about my sadness and my problems with a bunch of bros. And one of the guys was all into the red pill stuff. And that was where I was like, okay, what are the books I have to read? And that was kind of where I got my exposure. And that was kind of my feeling, was after reading a little bit of it and then him telling me, this is how women are, this is how they behave, this is what, and then describing to me multiple failed relationships where they turned out to be crazy at the end. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, you destabilized these women.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Crazy.
and the fact that he thought one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Terrible luck. What a bad luck that guy is.
Well, also, like, the thing is like, it's kind of this self-reinforcing feedback loop. You go out and you exhibit this mask that is basically a mirror of dark triad traits: Machiavellianism, sociopathy, and narcissism. Who is attracted to that is not someone who's doing very well. And then right? And then you are destabilizing them constantly. And then the relationship explodes, it goes up in flames, and you go, yeah, man, red pill, so true. Women are crazy. And then you go do it all over again. And every single experience you have reinforces the narrative of how emotionally unbalanced and messed up women are. But it's like, the thing that he didn't understand was there's this concept called selection bias. And selection bias is where it's like, you're trying to do statistics and stuff, but like, if you select, if where you're pulling your data from is biased, then your results are going to be skewed, right? So like, if you're self-selecting for like a certain kind of person, and then you're creating an environment that destabilizes them, and then you end up with the same experience over and over and over again, and then it reinforces the narrative. And so you just end up in this like just self-reinforcing loop, and you don't realize that you're actually the one who is kind of at the cause, at the root of it.
Yeah. I want to get to a couple notes I had, and then, because we've been almost going for 90 minutes, and then I want to get to some comments, and then I probably want to wrap this up. But there was earlier, actually, I think I probably have the comment, and I believe it was from Chandlar with many R's. Maybe not. Well, it was somebody that said more or less that there really isn't that much of a difference between men and women. And like you were saying earlier, when you start to go into what the qualities of positive masculinity are, they generally speaking are just things that make you a good person, and not necessarily like that a woman or a trans person can do. And it's like, it is not distinct to being a man necessarily. And that is why I've kind of tried to start thinking just maybe to persuade other people, instead of talking about feminism, talking about humanism. Because I don't know what exactly it means to be masculine or feminine, but I do know when I see a good person what that looks like. And I know the kind of person that I respect and the kind of qualities that I want to emulate. And some of those things have to do with being a man, I guess, but a lot of times it isn't. Um, and so I'm kind of wondering, I guess, first of all, what you make of that. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
as far as like what kind of
check
qualities?
check my vibes on that.
I
I'm not
I
saying that like feminism is bad.
no, I agree with you. It's
Christina says it better not be.
yeah, you know what's I mean, here's the thing. Words convey the point of words is to convey your meaning. And so choose the words that work for you, right?
Right.
And I have noticed that the word feminism has like a certain flavor associated with it with some guys. And I understand where that comes from, because, I've had the experience on the internet of someone just, deciding to tear me a new asshole off of something I said. And I'm like, that is
Me
not at
too.
all what I meant or where that came from. And then you click the profile and it's like raging feminist, like in the bio, like raging
Yeah.
feminist. And I'm like, look, and by the way, also sometimes like a day later, I'm called a beta cuck. So like,
Right.
I guess I'm just annoying everybody.
You're a
Right. So
radical leftist,
yeah,
Marxist,
radical
liberal.
leftist. When I had a purple beard on my profile, I got called a groomer. So,
Now, are they just saying that because you groom your beard, though? Because that is
uh,
true.
apparently have you seen this air quotes, the blue hairs? They're like,
Oh
oh, the blue
God.
hair, which I
Yes.
didn't even know that was a thing. Like that's like one of my favorite. I've like dated like 3 people with blue hair, and then I
I
found out
love
like
blue
that's a
hair.
thing. That I'm like, why
I've
would
always
you
wanted
be
to
a?
dye my hair blue.
Why is blue hair a bad thing? Like, what's wrong with people? Like,
I got it
it's
from
just
Strong
so.
Bad. Blue
It's
hair. I'm trying to
so
have blue hair.
yeah. So I agree with you. I would. So my feeling on this with my therapist. It's been a while since I went, but when I went within like a few weeks, we're talking about codependency,
Mm.
which like no surprise, right? I kind of described my experience with my mom and, like I said, I feel like kind of being like more on the agreeable versus disagreeable spectrum as a man. Like, I'm not that far to where I come across effeminate, but like I do, like I just am kind of just like, I don't want to fight. Like I tend to think it's my fault. I tend to be like taking the responsibility and wanting to fix things. And so when I got into
Yeah.
therapy for codependency, like one of the things he said was, um, you gotta like create an identity for yourself. And the way you do that is you start learning how to experience your feelings. So then you start
Yeah.
being in these environments and situations and you're like, I don't like this. I do like this. This makes me feel good. This lights me up. This excites me. And then he said, essentially at some point you got to start figuring out what your values are. And your feelings are kind of like the pathway to your values. Like what do I want? And I remember telling him, I was like, how do I separate what I want from what other people want? Like
Yeah.
that's how deep it ran. I said, sometimes my partner, the person I'm dating says they want something and then I hype myself up and I can't tell if I'm hyping myself up because I want to want it because they do, or if I'm actually
Right.
hyped up too. And that's, that is a process of learning to create an emotional boundary internally where
Yeah.
there's attunement to others, which is what I learned as a kid. I learned how to attune to my mother and very well, but there's also something called self-attunement,
Mm.
which is like, okay, I'm going to shut out the feelings that I'm absorbing from people around me. And I'm like, do a head to toe scan and like, how do I feel right now? Is you develop that. And there, there's like meditations or somatic experience. There's lots of ways to do that. As you develop that, you can start to create a sort of sense of like who you are. I don't, being a very free and feeling like a sovereign individual is like a very high priority for me. Feeling like I have, like a reasonable amount of like a comfort level, and I'm not constantly kind of just exhausted and pushing myself and all of that. Like I'm not a high, like overachiever, high producer. And so like I start kind of just, oh, okay, like this is what it feels like to be in my body, to have my feelings, to have my experience. And then from that comes these priorities and this sort of like, this is the direction I want my life to go in. And so, um, yeah, so for me, I guess that kind of also helped with the question of like, what does it mean to be masculine? I kind of replaced it with, what does it mean to be me?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's a better version of what I was thinking. At least in terms of getting yourself out of this kind of mindset. Because one thing that you said that I wrote down was that your relationship with women in the group was often based around like being worried, or like being like worried about saying the wrong thing, worried about making someone upset. And I think that that is so true, that true freedom is not being afraid to just like you know what you think, and you are not afraid to articulate your opinion, even if it is I don't know. And what we encounter it with Jehovah's Witnesses, obviously, who comment on our channels. But I've had a weird intersection of this because I talk about politics sometimes, and I had this guy who wanted to debate me on the channel once, about Trump around the time of the election, and it was really bananas. This guy, first of all, could not respond to a single question I ever said. Like, if I asked a question, he would answer a different question. And then he made he made a video on his channel hyping up this debate. And in this video, he talked about how he like wanted to like beat me up, and like he was making a lot of like weirdly violent jokes. And he made a thumbnail for this thing that had like my face all beat up and bloodied. And so I messaged this guy like, hey man, you are a stranger to me, and this is genuinely one of the creepiest things that anyone has ever done. If you're gonna be like this, I'm really not comfortable with that. And this person like just totally exploded and freaked out because they just were upset at the very idea that I was uncomfortable with them talking about wanting to beat the shit out of me so much. And it was just clear. And this person like then like deleted their channel and everything. It was crazy. And it was just like this person had clearly never said a lot of stuff out loud, and just had never had any, like nobody had ever told them that something that they were doing was making them uncomfortable.
No, so this was a current JW, and you kind of were like,
no, this was an ex-JW who was
okay.
a Trumper. And this was like, but it was clear that this person had kind of gone from JW to I've got it all figured out with the Trump of it all. And like, I'm pretty open on this channel. I do not have it all figured out. I often don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I think the I got it all figured out. The need for certainty is also just something that you really have to deconstruct, you know?
Yeah.
The need for certainty. Like if you,
the need for certainty is huge.
If you cannot get comfortable with, I don't know, somebody is going to sell you a set of lies and tell you it's the truth.
Oh yeah. I realized I didn't actually,
I don't know, then you're going to be, you're going to be able to like take a step back and go like, do I believe this? Does this make sense? But if you're like not comfortable with, I don't know, and I'll figure it out as I go, somebody's going to say, well, I have the plan, I have the answers. And that desire for certainty, it creates a blind spot that can be exploited.
Yes. And I think I forgot to say the end of that totally weird tangent I went on. The reason why it made me think of it is because like, I don't think I appreciated that I'm at a place where I am not nervous about streaming at all, ever. Unless I'm entering some really uncharted waters, or I'm talking about something that I've never talked about before, then I'll get a little nervous. But for the most part, I am sitting in my little office area talking to my friend, and I don't really care because I have a certain confidence that I know what I think about stuff. Like, I don't know if I'm right about everything, and I don't know everything at all, but I'm not. I think I've reached a point where I'm like, well, if I'm wrong about something, which I often am, someone will correct me, and it won't be that big of a deal. And if they're right, then I'll change my opinion based on that. If I mess up, also not a huge deal. But if it goes great, even better. Like, I had a lot of self confidence. I didn't really realize because it's just something I do a lot now. But for this person, and I don't think I appreciated this. Obviously, being on a live stream would be very stressful because they've probably never really done it before. And so to kind of get themselves psyched up for this, they adopted that macho alpha male personality. And when I just expressed that making me uncomfortable, that was not in their script, like we talked about earlier. Because what they are told is that people will be intimidated by that, and that people will cower. And like, this is what's so frustrating about Trump is whenever anybody actually does stand up to him, he has a conniption like a toddler, and it reveals just what a small person he is.
Oh, man.
And it's why his fans don't like people who criticize him, because it makes him look bad.
It's so frustrating because, like I said, coming out of the religion and then dabbling in the red pill stuff for like a month with those roommates, and then rejecting it, and then to watch it, like this nexus between the right and this like this particular brand of masculinity and this like pseudo strength, and it's just, man, it's such an unsettling time for,
it is. And I feel like we're just seeing so many people that are just
do in 4 years.
They're fucking pretending and full of shit.
In 4 years, when we've destroyed all of our connections with Europe and the rest of the world, and we've, God. And it's like, we're putting generations of people behind in like months,
Oh, yeah. But what I do find heartening about this is I do see just a lot of people, regardless of politics, even kind of taking a certain inventory and being like, I think I actually do spend too much time on social media. I think this is not good for me, and I am going to make a conscious effort to hang out in person more with more people. Or like, you know what? I think I do need to be a part of some kind of club or something. And so I'm going to do that. And I think that there is a recognition that we need more IRL in-person connections and communities that are, how do you ensure that something does not become a cult? There is a diversity of thought and culture and background, and those differences of cultures are allowed to coexist. I think that my politics, to the extent I could articulate them at all, is just like an acknowledgement that there is always going to be people that are different. There are always going to be people who we don't get along with, but we all are going to share a planet, and killing each other doesn't work. We fucking know that. So we got to find some way to work together. And I think a lot of men are just the evolutionary psychology kind of pseudoscience BS really appeals to them, because like you said, it tells them, no, you are this kind of creature and this is how you are. Don't fight your instincts. Just become this domineering man.
And it's like, what about the fact that, if you put a mouse in a little box that another mouse can open and you stick him in the cage, the other mouse will go free his friend, right?
Mm.
And then
I didn't know that. I hope that's true.
You put food in the cage, and then you put a mouse in a box in the cage, and this mouse has the option to eat all the food first and then go set his friend free. And he doesn't. He'll eat a bit, and then he'll go let his friend out so his friend can have some of the food. So it's like,
we can learn so much from our mouse friends.
Or you
watch
elephants, right? You watch elephants where there's some sort of noise. I was watching this footage of one of the zoos, and there was an earthquake coming, and all of the elephants gathered around the young in a circle, facing outward, and it's like, come on, guys, we're capable, we're mammal, we are social mammals too. Like, we are capable of other attributes other than
Yes.
hierarchy, status, protecting what's mine, and competition for resources and all of that sort of thing. Like, we are so much more complex than that. And to boil us down just to our survival instincts and not acknowledge the depth and beauty of what the human mind is capable of is just it's sad.
Yeah. No, it is. And we I do kind of want to go through a couple comments here. Um, okay, talk about that one. Talk about that one. Jenny Bloom had a good comment, which I just think is worth pointing out, that women have an alt-right pipeline with New Age divine feminine and divine masculine, which is just repackaged
That
patriarchal
was a
standards
cult,
for
that
the
was
sexes.
that was high. There's a cult behind that too. A
The
really
twin flames thing.
bizarre, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
Oh
absolutely
yeah,
true.
and they change like sexual purity to like spiritual purity, and there's an energy exchange, and it's also repackaged purity culture. Some of
Oh
that,
yeah.
like divine feminine, divine masculine stuff, like
You're a trad
don't
wife.
don't share your energies with somebody and all that sort of thing, like shaming casual sex
Oh
type of
yeah.
stuff.
Absolutely. And this brings us to this, which I thought was a really good question from Chronicles of Lucifer. Why do red pill influencers promote sexual repression as one key towards achieving goals? And
I
to
can't
explain this, if I may,
can't
just
even
for
keep track of all the different variations. I think this is is she talking about the semen retention
well,
nonsense?
let me. So, from my understanding, like the Proud Boys, for instance, they're like a no FAP group. Like, you're not supposed to masturbate.
Oh
And there is
gosh.
an increasing amount of that. That's the video that I've one of many works in progress is
Wow.
a cult of no fap video, and so I've been doing research on that. And it's because if you can teach people to hate something about themselves that is natural, you will always have control over them. Because generally
Yeah.
speaking, most people have sexual urges. There is nothing wrong with masturbating. It doesn't hurt anybody as long as you're not.
Have you ever read
Yeah.
Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind?
No.
I think you might like it. That's about as like that's the kind of evolutionary psychology where I find it compelling, because he did his work in multiple cultures. So to make sure that it wasn't just like a Western lens, but it's interesting because when you realize that we have these innate sort of moral sentiments, you start to see how a lot of these movements hook into that too. This sort of notion of like the sacred and the profane, or this
Hmm.
idea of like purity versus contamination. And then the human brain being as marvelous as is we can turn purity into a metaphor. So instead of like physically like wanting to stay clean and disease free, well, I'm trying to be like fit, like emotionally pure, or keep my body pure from sexual urges. And it's really fascinating. And it seems like uh, to me there's also like a self-worth component where it's like when you're steeped in a shame-based identity and just down on yourself, somebody can offer you quick and easy absolution, and it's sort of
Oh
a
yeah.
replacement for dealing with the self-worth. It's just sort of like, well, do this and you're superior, do this and you're sort of cleansed, you're renewed, you're
Yes.
kind of killing off this like shameful, disgusting person you were and becoming a better version. And like just very quick, easy stuff to then feel like you have kind of purified yourself in some way.
Yeah, it's sort of like in Severance, where you are split between your work life and your outer life, and it's like, well, neither one of these is ideal. What you need is to integrate both of these things. That like, is it the Freudian concept of like the shadow self? Like, that everybody kind of has a kind of a dark side. Maybe there's more negative aspects of the brain we were talking about earlier,
Yeah, the
and until
shadow
you make
self is
peace, yeah,
the shadow
until you
self is
make
like
peace with that.
the parts of you that you kind of shame away, and
Yes.
they don't disappear. They just kind of go dormant. But they're kind of they're kind of like the puppet masters with the strings, they're kind of behind the scenes, making you do stuff. Yeah, as
Yeah.
Carl Jung, he said,
Young. That's what it is.
until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life, and you will call it fate.
Yeah, and I think another thing that this quote I think about a lot. People know I'm obsessed with the show Lost, and so I've watched a lot of interviews with Damon Lindelof, and he first of all, what he talks about is that the show is about not like religious absolution or being saved in some way, but self acceptance. Can you accept these bad things you did in your life, before you were on this island, with the person you are now? Like, can you reconcile these things? And then another thing you said that reminded me of stuff you were saying earlier about like fear and anger is Lindelof said that every time in his life that he's been really angry about something, what was actually really beneath that emotion was fear. It always came from fear every time. And, I don't know that I've ever really analyzed my anger to that depth, but when I think about the stuff that makes me angry right now about like injustice and just the crazy shit that's happening, it is definitely coming from a place of fear. I don't want this to be happening.
I would push back a little bit on that, but not completely, because I agree with you. But I also think anger is it is a good clue as to when we feel there's some sense of injustice, like, and you said that, right? It's also, anger is a good clue about boundary violations. And I think like that's one of the things that we're going back where I said red pill gives you boundaries. One of the things for recovered nice guys and people who are codependent and people who trying to get over this sort of fawn reflex,
recovered nice guy here,
is to learn how to experience your anger not as an action or a behavior or something I have to do, but just something that occurs and it flows through you and it happens and then it's gone, and it's not bad or good. It just is. So then when you're in some situation and you're just like, oh, that made me angry. Okay. So where was the boundary violation? What was going on that was bothering you in the moment that you didn't speak up?
Yeah.
Right. And
I think,
and there's like a moment there where it's like, yeah, you know what? It really started to, it rattled me exactly in this moment. And I said nothing, and I didn't, and I stood there and I got humiliated and I laughed along with it, but inside I was dying. And it's like, okay, this is some knowledge to carry forward. Like, hey, I'm going to just remove myself from the situation this time. I don't want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and to clarify a little bit what I meant with the fear and anger thing, there's no such thing as a negative, like a bad emotion, because like that's what we're taught as Jehovah's Witnesses. That's like, you're having negative thoughts or whatever. But, I'm talking about these things are closely related.
Yeah.
Your fear and your anger. And those are the thing, like, and those are totally like normative things that happen in our brain. Everybody is going to feel fear and anger, and we need those things. Like, they are very important and they can be channeled, but they are also the things that can be most easily weaponized by people who want to take you for a ride. And so
I see what you're saying is like someone can make you afraid, then they can get you into anger, and then they've got you kind of like, they can steer you like a bull.
Yeah. And I think they can warp your sense of what makes you angry. You can get somebody mad about something that really doesn't matter. And I think with a lot of bigotry, and especially with the manosphere of like being afraid of feminism and like being afraid that women now have too many rights and all this stuff, they project it as anger, but it is really a fear of becoming irrelevant as a man. Like, well, what if I don't matter? Or I don't want people to matter more than me and to be forgotten or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, boundaries, but also, when it comes to sort of dealing with problems in relationships, I think that one of the things that I wanted to sort of touch on was this idea of like power and control and leveraging power dynamics in relationships. And, there's this idea in Red Pill of never a frame. And
never a frame.
No, the idea is called frame. Like always make sure that the other person is in your frame. So what is
this?
Okay, so this is another one of those things where I was like, this is exactly what the governing body does. So it is basically bending and altering the reality for the other person. So they're like, well, you did this and I'm upset. And it's like, do not accept their frame. Pull them into yours. And I'm like, this is this is like a very clever way of describing gaslighting is what this is. It's like, do not validate their experience. Do not confirm for them that what they experienced was hurtful or real, or that you made a mistake, and basically use emotional withdrawal and silence and anger, fear tactics to punish them for seeking emotional validation, seeking to tell you that your behavior was in other words, if your partner, your wife says like that really hurt me, that wasn't I don't know why you're being like this, you're crazy, like you shouldn't be raising this, you shouldn't be bothering me with this, basically deny, minimize, ignore. If the argument can't be resolved, just back away, get cold, get distance, whatever you have to do. Do not accept their frame. And it's so messed up because, and I think that this is a thing where if you've been in the experience where it's the opposite, where the other person has defined your reality, and then you run across this and you go, oh, that's it. And this is how to fight
I'm taking back control of my life.
Right. But
by controlling other people's lives.
The truth of the matter is, in a relationship, there are three realities. There's my experience and perspective. There's your experience and perspective. And then there's a shared third reality between the two of us that we have to negotiate together. And so we have to have a conversation where the way to have the conversation to not get steamrolled by somebody else is, you are entitled to your experience. So you are entitled to say, when you do this, I'm hurt. And the person goes, well, that wasn't what I intended. That's fair. Like, you're the authority on what you intended, what your motivations were, like all of your reasons, but other people get to decide for themselves how they experience you.
Yeah.
And that's the dance in a relationship. That's the sort of negotiation. That's the give and take, is that shared third reality that you built, that you craft together, where you navigate those differences between intention and motivation versus like how it affects somebody else. And somebody might not experience you the way you intend to be experienced, and vice versa. And you have to find a way to negotiate that together if you actually want to have intimacy. Whereas, if you're doing this, seize the frame stuff, it's very zero sum game. It's my reality or yours. If you win, I lose. If I win, you lose. Who wants to be in a relationship? Who wants to sleep with the enemy?
Yeah.
I mean, like, who wants to be in a relationship where you are adversaries?
Yeah. I think, to bring it all back to the only thing that I'm capable of using to understand the world, Star Wars, it is Yoda's speech that, like, when Luke's training on Dagobah and Yoda starts talking about the dark side, Luke's like, is it more powerful? And Yoda's like, no, quicker, more seductive, but it is not more powerful. And to me, that is and like the prequels are all about, making that kind of like democracy versus fascism too. And it's like, yes, it is way easier to just be a huge domineering asshole and to try and achieve power that way. Obviously, the people who are in charge of our government are there because they just eroded their souls over time and became people who no longer cared about how their actions affected other people. Well, it did get them power, but they suck, and we all hate them, and they're bad at their job, or like whatever. And the much harder thing is the actual like training and hard work that goes into like democracy or whatever kind of pluralistic society, or just your own mindset of like, it is harder to get along with people and to accept that I am shitty sometimes and that everybody can be an asshole and that we're all going to be wrong, we're going to fail each other, is not as quick and seductive, but it is, unfortunately, it is better. It's better and you're happier.
Yeah. And I think that you will. I think one of the joys of being close to somebody is to get to a point of trust and safety with somebody that you can, to me, like true vulnerability is being unguarded and defenseless in the presence of another.
Yeah.
Like that's what it means to be vulnerable. It's like,
not me. I'm strapping. I ain't gonna do that. You can do that.
And so like you don't get there with power games.
Yeah. And really, the alt-right pipeline, whatever we want to call it, all it's really trying to do is to turn you into a very good worker in the capitalist machine. Like they want to make you somebody who's going to follow commands and enact the company mission or whatever, and that's actually not good for you. Like all of those techniques that they're teaching you to do on women, they are doing it to you. You just can't see it because, you know, if you could, then you would actually have to get out of it and change your mind and do the hard work of becoming a more three-dimensional person.
I heard something interesting the other day I hadn't thought about too, where with the political end, where all of this, you know, trying to force people to have kids and that whole thing now, like we got to get people to have more. And somebody said something so fascinating. They said, you know, childless folks are ungovernable. You know, like, and it's true. Like I have no kids. My ex and I had no kids. Like if the government really gets on some crazy shit, like I'm kind of ready to like, you know, die standing than live on, you know, how they say, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees type of thing. But if you can get everybody like settled down and having like a ton of kids and stuff, like it really is kind of, well, whatever the government decides to do, like you're just going to shut up and do your job, you know?
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
The amount of, to me, it's very natural that the economy, the economic uncertainty, the expenses of living, the cost of housing. It's a very natural and obvious that people are having fewer children, and the powers that be are just like, no, like you shall not adapt to uncertainty by making choices to keep yourself from being stressed out and overwhelmed. You will, you know, be a good little worker bee and do as you're told and you know, be a cog in the machine. And it's just, it's a lot.
Yeah, man. I on one hand, I'm not sure what we accomplished, but on the other hand, it felt like we accomplished something.
I feel like the whole question of the evolutionary psychology stuff and biological essentialism is like its own huge issue. So
it is.
And that video from Münecat that you mentioned, like you stick that in the notes. That one is pretty fantastic.
I agree. I liked Münecat before it was cool. I want to say I was an early adopter, but that literally doesn't matter. Thank you so much for being here. Where can we find you on the internet, RC?
Ooh, find me on Instagram at deconstructing_XJW.
I'll put it in the description.
And someday I'll make a YouTube channel too.
Please do.
Not today.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess you don't have to do it today, but maybe tomorrow. No, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I hope people see it because I do think that, you know, we fellas.
I was really happy to do this. This has been weighing on my mind for a long time because it's just.
Me too. I've been avoiding the subject, I feel like.
And I didn't, you know, I feel like it's a difficult subject to tackle because it's there's a lot of pain and personal experience and trauma and things that I think go into this. And I think that a lot of the conversations that we have is very much more on a level of like, how do we counteract the ideology from a logic perspective and debunk it?
Yeah.
And I think what we really need is to talk about like, man, you got to get some friends, and you've got to figure out who you are, and you've got to deal with the self-worth issues and sort of take it on from the emotional level.
Yeah, like if you never hang out with any gay people or trans people, it is very easy to believe whatever kind of narrative. Same with women. And especially if you only hang out with a certain kind of woman for a certain kind of reason, or you're only female friend is your wife, then you're not like it's easy to be told a narrative about an other because you don't know the other. And who cares if they're shipped off to El Salvador? You don't know them. They're probably bad. We should probably just assume that it's fine. But if you have just a more diverse, group of friends or just something you do once in a while with some other people, then you're just going to be less likely. It is the best, inoculator against bigotry, I think.
Laura Anderson, the religious trauma expert, talks about this concept of an internalized felt sense of safety. And I think I talked about feeling kind of calm, centered and settled within yourself, and sort of like comfortable, and I'm okay. And like you were saying, how fear can be transmuted to anger. And if you can sort of, whether it's therapy, friends, whatever it is, if you can get to that sort of centered, like, I'm okay, I'll be okay. A lot of these other issues and concerns, they become much more manageable. The will I be alone too long? Will I find a partner? If you can get to a place of like, I'm okay, it just gives you like a lot of freedom to just sort of figure life out,
Yeah. Let go of the fear of being wrong. And the upside is everybody here in the comments too has been super mega wrong about something very important in their lives, and we live to tell the tale. I am much happier, just no question outside of the cult than I was inside of it. And I still am married to the same wonderful woman, and I still have honestly many of the same values. I really haven't changed too much, I don't think, from the exterior, but what is different is just the way I think largely about myself, and certainly other people.
Do you have to get going?
I do, because I have to be up early for work. Otherwise, I would chat for another 2 hours.
I have so many questions about actually staying married after leaving the religion versus being in, because mine only.
Well, I got lucky. That's the only advice I have is I got very lucky in that we just happened to be very compatible. We didn't get married too young, and she also had her own journey leaving the witnesses, and it's not easy by any means. But I agree. Maybe next time we do this, we can talk a little about that, and we can open up the phone lines and do a proper religious trauma call-in show.
That'll be fun.
My wonderful wife, who I believe is sharpening a pencil, and that's the noise. No, you're fine. I don't even know if it picked up on mic, but I was like, whoa, what the hell was that? All right. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. People, I'm going to play this creepy video clip that I meant to play at the beginning to take us out.
Christian wives, are you happy? Do you love being a wife? Well, probably right now you're looking at your husband and saying, of course, that's good. But could you